Hello from Portland. I was reading today about the hearings on same-sex marriage in the Minnesota legislature, and this has been all over a bunch of sites that I visit. A Minnesota resident came to testify against same-sex marriage, and his testimony consisted basically of a lot of graphic and mostly inaccurate facts about the mechanics of gay sex. And I don't want to get into correcting or refuting his testimony, I'll just let it speak for itself, but it reminded me of something that comes up a lot in this debate that I wanted to talk about. And I've talked about this a little bit before in some videos about same-sex marriage, which is that I think to understand the debate about same-sex marriage, you have to understand that the different sides of the debate are kind of proceeding from different moral foundations, from different frameworks of analysis. I think the pro-same-sex marriage side is looking much more at the practical harm or benefit of same-sex marriage and concluding that it would benefit people without harming anyone and therefore makes perfect sense as a matter of basic fairness and equity. I do not think that the other side of the debate is just the reverse of that. I think the other side of the debate is really much more concerned with the idea of marriage as being sacred and pure, and that therefore allowing gay people to participate in marriage would somehow corrupt it. Now, I don't agree with that, but I think it's important to understand that's the premise of the side that opposes same-sex marriage. That's why they talk about sex so much. You almost never hear the pro-same-sex marriage side launch into graphic discussions of the mechanics of gay sex, because most people don't launch into graphic discussions of the mechanics of their sex lives. The other side talks about sex, I think, because they are hoping to elicit some primitive distaste for gay sexuality that will then translate into opposition to same-sex marriage. It's happening at a very visceral level. Now, I think ultimately that really isn't going to work. I think even people who don't particularly want to talk about or think about gay sex understand that that's not a reason to deny people equality under the law. Nobody wants to talk about their sex lives in public. Nobody is required to explain the details of their sex lives before getting a marriage license. It's nobody's business. So I think ultimately that whole approach is going to be less and less effective. The other issue this raises kind of overlaps with some of the discussions going on about women and women's issues in politics and the media that some people in the group have been engaging in that I've been following with great interest. The very first blog post I ever wrote was about this overlap between women who were talking about access to contraception, which is a very important healthcare issue, an economic issue for a lot of women. And anytime a woman would step forward to talk about access to contraception, there would be this round of people trying to shame her or make her sound like some kind of sex maniac or act as if she was being inappropriate because she was talking about contraception. And it just drove me crazy because it's very similar to a lot of the attempts to silence gay people by saying you can't talk about same-sex marriage because it's gross and because that makes me think of things I don't want to think about and you're disgusting. There's a lot of that overlap. And women who are talking about access to contraception aren't doing it because they're trying to flaunt their sex lives. Many of them are married, many of them are in monogamous relationships, but they don't want to have children at this point in their lives, and they are very wisely trying to ensure access to contraception so that they can plan their families. And obviously, talking about contraception may make some people think of sex, but that doesn't mean it's inappropriate or that you're some kind of exhibitionist because you want to talk about a very serious public health issue. And same-sex marriage is kind of in a similar position. I'm perfectly fine listening to whatever arguments people want to make for their position for or against same-sex marriage. But the constant resort to talking about the intimacies of people's sex lives as if that's relevant to the debate just does not strike me as a very good framework for any kind of public debate. And to be honest, I think people like this guy in Minnesota are just hurting their cause. They're just increasing their isolation from people who want to talk about this in a reasonable, constructive way. Thanks for watching. I'll see you tomorrow.